How you doing, everybody? It's your old pal James Larson from 94.1 KRNA Radio in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and welcome to, what's the name of our show now, guys? We've changed the name.
We're the Craft Beer Corner,
the
James.
Craft Beer Corner. So no longer is it Craft 101, we're the Craft Beer Corner. As always, my good friends here, Drew Knutson from the Mellow Mushroom.
Cheers.
And Kirk Hayden from Metro Studios. All right, Kirk, we've got some royalty today. We're going to drink the #1 IPA in Iowa per Iowa's Beer Blogs Bracket Challenge. How did you land this for us here on our exclusive podcast?
I reached out to the guys, and they said, we'd love to let you try our beer. Brewery, Franklin Street Brewing out of Manchester, owned by a couple of brothers that were local brewers. And, they were home brewers and decided to start a brewery in Manchester in 2012. And so when I saw on the Iowa Beer Blog that this beer, the Drugstore Cowboy that we're talking about today, was going up against a couple of probably the best beers, IPAs in Iowa, from Pulpit Rock and Toppling Goliath, huge, followers there. I took notice. I'm like, I got to try this.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to the guys, and they're like, yeah. So they brought us down. We're pretty fortunate to have their beers here today. They're running a great operation up there. They're in an old building, oldest building that contains a brewery in the state of Iowa. They got it.
Cool.
That's
so
really
so
cool.
They got some historical things going on up there if you're into architecture.
Sure.
They're just having a great time brewing up there. The one thing I said, so take me back to 2012. And
yeah, I love this story.
And he's like, yeah, he goes, we decided to start a brewery. And he said, everybody in town said to us, you're going to start a brewery? Do you realize this is a Busch Light town?
Blue smoothie,
like most small towns in Iowa are Busch Light towns.
Exactly.
Yes,
this is Manchester, Iowa. Keep that in mind.
Right.
Okay.
So they did it. And as Chad was telling me earlier this week, he said some of our best customers used to be Busch Light drinkers, and now
Not
they...
anymore.
Hey, let's just throw it out there. Nothing wrong with Busch Light.
not at all.
Nothing wrong with Busch Light at all.
Week.
It's just craft beer's going to have just a lot more flavor than a Busch Light.
So, Drew, why don't you talk about this beer before we try it? 6.3% ABV, and it's a New England IPA. And how they got its name, it says, you talk a big game, but you aren't really a cowboy. Since this was their first attempt at making an IPA, they really could talk a big game, but weren't sure what they were doing. So put together the recipe based on their likes, and it came out great. So first of all, New England IPA. Educate everybody on that.
Well, the first thing about a New England IPA, it should be a little bit more cloudy than a regular IPA.
I noticed that right away.
That's the style of a New England IPA. So it's more unfiltered is a good way to say it. So it is a little more cloudy. I tell you what, right off the start, I didn't think it was an IPA. I expected a little bit more. I love the finish. I love the taste. And I tell you what, craft beer drinkers out there, especially if you start, you can't judge a beer on the first taste. You really can't.
I've noticed that when you come in on my morning show. This has happened to me. As you guys know, I'm new to this. That's happened to me. All of a sudden, I'm halfway through, and I go, I love this.
It's palate shock, I don't care if you drink IPAs every day. Every time you try a new IPA, you're like, okay, what is that? It usually takes 2 or 3 drinks before. That's what I ask you to do before you make your final decision.
Now, Kirk, I hate to bring this up in front of everybody, but you kind of cheated on us a little bit because you had one of these last night before we started filming and even talking about doing this. So,
cheater.
James, it's like having a piece of chocolate cake sitting there and being told you can't eat it.
Right, yeah.
These are sitting in my refrigerator, and, well, I invited a buddy over that... is a home
Which was
brewer.
neither one of us,
Neither
James.
one of us.
Neither one of us.
Buddy,
yeah.
Even on the internet, I can't say that.
Right. But, and he thoroughly enjoyed it. And as did my son who came over. I'm like, hey, this is a big deal. After having the Drugstore Cowboy, having it a little bit last night, today's your first attempt at it. When we talk about Untapped and the beer app, Untapped gives it a national average or an average of all votes for it. It gets a 4.16 out of 5. Okay, that's pretty solid as an average.
Yeah.
And so after having it, I gave it a 4.75. It's right up there with the other craft beer that I really, really like, the IPA Pulpit Rock's Saftig. I think they're I think they're both fantastic.
So this came in 4.16 out of 5, but then this Dirty Laurel Secret, that came in a little higher at 4.21 out of 5 on Untappd.
And that's what caught my attention. I'm like, okay, so you guys are making this other IPA, and it didn't win the Iowa Beer Blog Challenge,
right,
but it actually gets a better rating, 4.21 on Untappd, than the winner. So I asked him to bring that, and I think it's a little bit different beer. I don't like it as much. I'll give it a solid 4 out of 5. I just don't think it's quite as much citrus aroma to it, which is an area I gravitate to.
I kind of like the second. I like the Dirty Laurel Secret a little better. What do you think? I mean, they're very. You can see in color, in texture, they're pretty similar. But what do you think, there, Mr.
Again,
Knudsen?
they categorize this as a New England IPA, so as you can tell, it's foggy, it's unfiltered. But they obviously used a different hop in this beer. So the first one, definitely a true IPA, very hoppy, bitter on the end. This one drinks more like a pale ale. I'm going to go exactly opposite of where Kirk went, only because I love him.
Well, and you're mad that I didn't let you drink it last night.
Exactly. I saw
but this is a really solid IPA. I'm picking up just for my palate, just a hint of grapefruit in this beer. It comes from the hops. It's not grapefruit. That's not my thing.
Right.
This still 4.3 in my mind. It's still really solid IPA. Got great balance. But this one here, I'm going 5 stars.
Wow.
Dirty Laurel
the 5
Straight. Yes,
stars.
I am. I'm going the 5-star here. There is nobody that could not drink this beer. This, we always
all day.
All day.
All day. We talk about,
great
starting
Kirk
at blonde
all
ales.
Day
on a previous podcast, we used to start talking about, started at blonde ales and other type of ales. But I tell you what, if you ever find the Dirty Laurel Street, try this
Dirty
beer.
Laurel Secret. And the Laurel,
Secret. Sorry, you were close.
As I'm told, I was not up on that. The Laurel is an actual hop grown in the northwest part of the country.
Yes, I read that.
That's where they got that name.
So Franklin Street Brewing Company. Let's first of all give them some props. Out of Manchester, Iowa, by the way. Let's give them some props. I'll let Kirk do that. But can a little brewery out of Manchester compete with these big breweries like the New Belgiums and these mainstream national breweries, if you will?
Yeah. I think that, and I asked this question to Chad when I was talking to him. And one of the things he said, I said, Chad, isn't Iowa really becoming kind of the craft brewery capital now?
Yeah.
I mean, we're
and
growing
Chad's
so
one of the owners?
Yes, Chad's one of the owners.
Okay. All right.
And he said, back when we started this brewery in 2012, there were 24 breweries in Iowa. Today there are 90.
Unbelievable.
Oh, that's what we got to do. We got to spend 2-3 days and go visit all 90 breweries.
I like
That's
it.
called a brewcation.
I like it. I like it.
We're followers. We're gonna do that sometime this summer. Maybe on our bikes.
We could.
No,
do
we're
that.
not doing that.
Hey,
we're
real
not
quick,
doing that.
Before we get out of here, we like to keep this podcast to around 10 minutes. And comment below if you think it's too long, too short. But I want to ask you guys kind of a weird question. Do you think in 10 years from now it's going to be all IPAs and there'll be no more Busch Light, no more Bud Light? Will that ever happen where we phase out the regular domestic beers here in this country?
No.
I would agree. No.
Yeah, I did.
But one of the things that we were talking about is I asked him, I said, why do you think Iowa beers have become so popular and so good, in my opinion? And he said, there is one reason. The water.
Oh, sure.
And I had not thought about that.
Takes good hard water to make good
right.
beer.
And he said, we literally open up the spigot in Manchester. Manchester has great water. We're fortunate for that. And that's why we think our beers taste as good as they do.
Wow.
Because we have a great city water supply. And beer's 90% water. So
Yeah,
there you
sure
go.
is. It sure
Shout
is.
out
Let's-
to the boys up in Manchester at
for
Franklin
sure.
Street Brewery.
And one last thing, you see us drinking beer on this podcast each and every week. We really want to let people know to practice safe drinking. If you're going to have a few beers, don't get behind the wheel of a car. You own a restaurant, the Mellow Mushroom in Coralville, and I know you guys use Uber and Lyfts and things like that, but really, there's no reason, if you're going to go out and have a few, especially when we're talking ABV of higher than driving, 7-8%. I think responsible driving is what it's all about.
Oh, without a doubt. And I tell you what, our law enforcement does a great job out there, and they don't want to pull us over.
They sure don't.
They really don't. You might think they want to. They really don't. So yeah, just play it smart. Designated driver. Uber is becoming so easy to use, and cab services, whatever you want to do. But myself, I've given customers ride home sometimes. So whatever has to happen to stay safe.
Franklin Street Brewing Company, thank you so much. And Kirk, you get the star. You get a couple stars today. This was your baby. And I sure appreciate you. Just invite me over the day before next time. So
all right, I will, especially if I have a couple of cold Bud Lights sitting in my refrigerator.
I'm going to leave and go start planning our route.
There you go. I like it. For Kirk and Drew, I'm James Larson. This has been an exclusive podcast right here of the, am I saying it right? Craft Beer Corner, where I nailed it, where we make beer drinking great again.